good as long as they're not beans in it. That's beans and chili defeats the purpose to me. I want ground meat in soup-ish form. I don't want beans.
You guys have got some really weird takes today, and that's saying something coming from this group, but okay. So Tabasco sauce on salad. The whole world needs to hear
because we had to
this
listen to Ben's anal leakage earlier.
I'm going to put you guys in the category.
No.
I'm going to put you guys in the category with my buddy who puts pickles on his tacos, right? So now we have horrified you. It is Saturday morning. You're welcome. We're all squicked out. Now let's talk about horror movies. So the first one, it's a moist cake. I just had to get something else gross in there. So for everybody else.
Moist is not that big a deal. People who are squidged out by moist. No.
Especially in a cake.
People who shudder at the word moist need to get outside more.
Same
even when you do it ASMR style. Just
go touch some moist grass, please. Okay. So to start this off, we even had like directions this time. I put them on the thing. I hope that everyone followed them.
Oh, I didn't see those at all.
Great.
Yeah, you were the one I was worried about the most.
Yeah.
We had
surprise.
Pick 2 movies. It was on the top of the page for you to put your movies on. It's like,
was it from there?
He was elected to lead, not to read.
Where's it from?
So one
Simpsons.
that was personally the most disturbing to you, and the other one that's just your favorite of the genre because they're probably not going to be the same thing.
I definitely saw that. No, I know I saw that.
Yeah, because while we were talking about it, I immediately ran into that problem. I was like, sometimes my favorite's the one that keeps me up at night because that's why I'm watching a horror movie. But my really favorite doesn't keep me up at night anymore. But it's by far my favorite horror movie. Well, yeah. I mean, if you weren't horrified by the shit happening in The Mist, like I'm concerned about you. But
okay, we can start with you because you're.
Jesus.
I mean,
volunteer.
It's fine. Okay,
you started it.
I'm gonna go with horrifying first, and so like. Horrifying for me changes over time, right? Because on a personal level, like part of why I like horror movies is that it's, it's mental armor, right? So it's like way back in the Wayback Machine, right? Like I grew up on the tail end of like, let's hide under our desks in case nuclear bombs fall. And what if zombies come out? I rode that kick in the 2000s. And what if we get bombed back to the Stone Age types of stuff? And it always kind of bugged me reading stories or watching movies or something where somebody was like, oh no, it's somebody in a rubber mask and I'm going to just go insane and just completely lose myself, right? So like I watch a lot of horror movies to kind of just be like, yes, this is absolutely horrifying, but to like, prepare myself a little bit, especially like Cthulhu Mythos, which I only realized in hindsight, both of these movies are Stephen King and both of them
you only realized that in hindsight.
Yes. And both of them are, because like I was explaining it to some friends. They were like, oh, what are you doing next on the podcast? And I'm like, oh, shit. I didn't realize that. Not only that, one of my drama movies is Stephen King. Yeah. I don't like him that much. And yet, like, you wouldn't know that from my picks, right?
Maybe you should pick up some Stephen King books. I don't know how many you read, but
I've read it. Maybe you should know what you're talking about. So I've read
clearly the movies are better. Is actually
Mist,
what we're going for here.
Well, it depends who it is, right?
No.
Like Shawshank Redemption is a Stephen King movie, but it's a great movie.
That's a great movie.
Yeah, also not remotely horror, whereas like
true.
The Green Mile at least has some of his shining stuff in it, right?
Stephen King is 90% of the time I find Stephen King is more of a character-driven. It's more like a supernatural thriller than a real true horror. Like it has a bunch of creepy stuff in the beginning, but by the middle, the rules are pretty much figured out, and you're kind of just following the story, which is fine. I find it more of like a supernatural suspense. It puts you more in the Hitchcock mood than in a a hiding under the bed kind of mood.
It depends. So
fair enough.
And it, in my opinion, pushed that, right? So what I was getting at with like the whole like. It was my pick because it was the last movie I could think of that kept me up at night, especially because I actually just watched like It Part 2 not too long ago on HBO. I watched It Part 1 back in 2017 when it came out. We went to, like one of those adult movie theaters. It's Alamo here. What is it? I think
Alamo
so.
Draft House.
Alamo Draft House.
No, it's not that then. I can't remember the name of the place here. Anyway, but it's like Alamo Draft House. So we went there, had a bunch of crazy people. It was like one of the first or last movies we watched it. It was like one of the last movies we watched in Utah, and it was one of the first or last movies we watched with, I think the wife was either pregnant with number one or had just had him or something like that. Never mind. He would have been 2 by then. Long story short, It is one of the few books that like was horrifying to me. Like while you're reading it, to me, like reading horror doesn't really get into the filters, right? I'm not so visual that I'm like, oh man, that's going to give me nightmares forever. But I still did have like nightmares of Pennywise a little bit while I read. So I'm like, well, I can say whatever I want, but like the book kept me up at night. But that was kind of what I kept with it. And it also kind of hits on all the things that I like about the mythos anyways, which is you're fighting something crazy, supernaturally unbeatable. You're literally children the first time. And then you basically beat it ultimately by, just not being afraid, right? You beat it with your imagination or something like that, right? You're not just sitting there. It's not, let's drop bombs. Nobody's doing some, crazy ritual or whatever, except for, in the books. Let's not talk about that. There is, a little bit of stuff that, can't be left unsaid, but,
Right.
We're gonna, so, but yeah, so like for that, it kind of was my latest pick. I mean, notables in the past, which also made this list, but from somebody else, was like Paranormal Activity, right? The first Paranormal Activity and even the second one, those really got to me. Hereditary in this case got to me as well, but I hadn't seen it yet, so it wasn't my list, right? And then The Mist is kind of the flip side of that. I mean, everything about The Mist is horrifying, in my opinion. Like, they're completely out of their depth. They have no idea what's going on. Even the experts, quote unquote, are, kind of out of their depth and everything. The ending is absolutely like soul crushing. Everybody should know the story that Stephen King, was like, hot damn, I should have come up with that ending, there's several emotional moments that, like, I'm not necessarily afraid of like clowns or spiders in The Mist, right? Which are those little fear buttons that they push for the cheap stuff. But it also just kind of fascinated me in The Mist. Like, this is a kind of cataclysmic event, at least for this small town. Like, what would you even do? Like, are you the guys in the grocery store just, chilling out, waiting for it to blow over? Or do you go out there and risk it? And how long does that go until, you see the first guy get eaten, like in the parking lot, for crying out loud, and stuff like that. And The Mist is also like, it's very Stephen King formulaic as well, because you got the religious nut jobs start taking over and shit like that as well. But The Mist is like just so well done that's one that I used to watch like yearly, after it came out. I've watched it in black and white. I finally tracked down the novella a few years back when I was doing my kick.
How does the ending compare in your own judgment of the novella?
So the ending in the novella is much more open. So, spoilers, but whatever, it's old, right? So in the ending, basically they find like an abandoned hotel or motel, and they're basically like writing a journal, and they're about to literally, like, they've been driving through the mist, and I think they had just left Maine, or they were on the border of Maine, writing this journal, and they're like, this is probably the last you're going to hear of us, but we've got to go see like if this is just a local thing or not, type of thing. So they're about to, instead of driving off into the sunset, they're about to drive out into the mist and still hope for the best, even though they've already spent several days on the road by then. But it's one of those, like, provisions are getting kind of thin, we're starting to lose hope, but we got to see if this is a local kind of phenomenon. And so that energy is captured in the movie. But the ending in the movie is completely unthinkable. Like, it just, I mean, I couldn't imagine the mental state I would have to be in to think that I was going to make that kind of decision. Let alone 5 minutes later, effectively having that entire thing be invalidated. super spoilers, and I really recommend if you have not seen this movie and you plan to, you should not spoil this ending. So really stop listening. But if I were that guy, I would have rolled myself under a tank right about then, because I'm like that. Nope, one of you guys got a sidearm. Like I would have rushed one of the soldiers or rolled myself under a tank. Like there's just no.
The movie ending really has almost a Night of the Living Dead kind of vibes to it for me, because it's this the officials arrive and you've realized the movie is not even so much about the monsters, it's about man's inhumanity to man, and
Right.
the brutality under pressure, people inflicting on each other horrible things, which is
Right.
a classic horror motif, and I think works really well in the new ending for The Mist.
Right.
Which it totally works in Night of the Living Dead, but totally works in basically that's the whole point of something like The Walking Dead. The zombies become almost like a
It's kind of
afterthought.
secondary.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
The Walking Dead is a drama about people in survival situations that just happen to be there because of zombies, right? Because and that was one of the things that I liked about The Walking Dead. Like I'm hugely into zombies, and someone's like, go watch The Walking Dead or go read the comics or whatever, because the show wasn't out at the time. But they were like, but it's not about the zombies. And I'm like, that is a weird ass recommendation to give me, who's like hugely into the zombies. But it did kind of help me understand, like, you get the same things in like 28 Days Later, right? 28 Days Later,
Right.
sure, they're running from the zombies, but the climax is
Right.
like the zombies are there, but it's more about, men versus men at that point, or people versus people, type of stuff. Compared to like Dawn of the Dead, right? And the remake, especially, anyway, where it's just like there is some people versus people stuff, but for them, that is very much just a survival situation, right? So.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's an interesting thing about the ending of Night of the Living Dead compared to this, because you're right. In some senses, it's almost the same thing. You basically just have dudes with rifles roll up and start blasting everything, and then the threat's over, and it's just like, well, okay, that's the end of the movie, and all this other horrific shit happened 15 minutes ago, So.
Yeah, it's literally. Spoilers. I mean, should I just say? Anyway, he shoots his kid, right? That's the whole thing,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
so he's
kid,
driven. He's
the
driven
two
to.
old people, his girlfriend.
He's driven to do what everyone is wanting him to do for the whole movie, more or less, and he finally succumbs just when he didn't need to.
Right.
Right.
And and it's impossible to know, right?
Right.
that's all part of it. Like in a way, in like another setting, it might be something that I'd be mad at the author about, right? Or the writer in this case, because it's like the writer knows, right?
Right.
But you could kind of see it being true to life as well, right? And it's just one of those situations where it's like, I think it's tricky. Like there's such thing as too much realism, right? It's one of the things I rail against World War Z about. Ironically, another zombie movie, but mostly just because in the movie, what happens is like this guy spends like a 5-10 minute scene talking to Brad Pitt about how he's personally going to save the planet and he's going to find a cure to the disease. And then 5 minutes later, he trips and shoots himself in the face. And it's like, bro, this is like supposed to be a AAA blockbuster. He's literally there with Navy SEALs protecting him and all of this other shit. Now, I'm not going to say in the history of the world, nobody has ever tripped and shot them in the face, but maybe you could have just, eaten him by zombies, or a number of other things could have taken this guy out instead of that. And so like that's where like I think The Mist is kind of like on the cusp of like, maybe there have been real life situations where it's like, if you fuckers had been 5 minutes earlier, none of this would have happened, or a number of other things. If the guy had had 5 more minutes of doubt or 5 more minutes of metal, to hold out that much longer or whatever. But like in the movie, I think they run out of gas. They're on the side of the road. They're completely cut off and out of supplies. And certainly after you've watched a number of other people being eaten by the creatures in the mist, your idea is probably mercy, right? You want to save your kid and everybody like that from that same fate. And then extra writing, nonsense. There are only 4 bullets in the chamber on a 5-bullet gun. And there's 5 of them and 4 bullets, and so he winds up with the last one. So, I mean, the ending's a huge part of it. Don't get me wrong, but like, I'm not saying like The Mist only gets good at the ending. I like The Mist through, right? So, but the ending is definitely the exclamation point at the end, where you just sit there in the dark at the end. And you're like, "Fuck! What did I just watch? What's going on?"
You sit there in the dark at the end. That would be a great summary of what these horror movies are.
Well, and it is, right?
Like, I think it leaves you much the same feelings in many ways than what's it called? The one we watched a while ago for Perfect Movie, Children of Men. Is that what it's
called?
Oh,
yes, yeah.
And it's a depressing movie,
right? And you absolutely know, like once the credits roll, like, and you're just sitting there looking at the credits, and you're like, I'm stuck here with my feelings now. Like some of those are the better ones. Like, and then of course the ones that keep you up at night, maybe it's a good thing if when the credits rolled, you immediately went and found some eye bleach or turned on the lights, then that should have been your pick for scariest movie. But anyway, that's a little bit about why, I like them. Like I realized in hindsight, especially, like they're both, I mean, in The Mist, he straight up, I think he references, H.P. Lovecraft. Like one of the characters is like, this is like something right out of H.P. Lovecraft or whatever. After I think in the novella, it's like after the kid gets pulled through the vent, like the first kill by that tentacle.
I don't think it's in the movie. But
yeah, it is.
I didn't remember that. That would be interesting or funny. The Mist was a really good movie, though. I really enjoyed the characters.
Right. Andre Baumgartner, I couldn't remember his first name at first, but it's like we all know him as Captain Holt now, and he's a total fucking douchebag in this movie. And like I hated his character so much initially, and then it's like watching it, subsequent times, and it's like, I mean, I kind of understand, but there's still like a lot of
the lawyer, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
And the fact that he fucking survives, like that's the other part too. Like the extra twist of the knife in the ending is that on the truck with all the army people is everybody they told not to leave because they die. Every single one of them lived for the most part, right?
Well,
like the lawyers there were some kids, and like if you didn't see them die already, right.
I didn't remember him being on there, but didn't remember like focusing on the mothers. Like, so if he had left with her, everything would have been fine.
Yeah,
possibly. Yeah,
I did find her aggravating. Though, it's like, won't you escort a lady home or whatever? Bitch,
right.
Like he's here with his kid. What are you fucking saying? Like, hello?
Right. Well, and fun fact, if I'm not thinking about a different character, like so, Frank Darabont did this, and he also did season 1 of Walking Dead, the show. And that mother's Carol, So. Yeah.
He also famously did the Shawshank Redemption, like that's he's the Green Mile. Did he also do Green Mile? Like he did basically all the good Stephen King adaptations, all the really really good ones. Yeah. Oh, the stellar critically acclaimed kind of ones. I mean, I don't think he did Stand By Me, but yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, that was a lot of time, and other people need to talk, but. Anybody not like them? I mean, I guess that's a thing, right? This is a book.
I enjoyed them both. I mean, it did not scare me at all. It was just an enjoyable movie. Same. I even watched the second one.
Were you a little hungry for, children?
Did you watch the Tim Curry one?
I didn't. Right. I was wondering about like how would they compare, but the kids did not annoy me as much as I feared that they would.
Right. And part of the reason why I like, the movie, this iteration, is because I had just read the books not too long before. And I was like, I mean, as far as movie adaptations go, this is a really good one, so like, whereas like the Tim Curry one definitely plays up the campiness that could be inherent in a story like that. I felt like the movie took it a lot better. The casting was phenomenal, especially like in part 2 where they've got to cast them now as adults. And
it's kind of creepy. Like, oh wow, that guy really does look like that kid.
Right.
Know exactly who I'm looking at. It was so part 2. I would just as a comment, it did kind of change genres a little bit. I mean, I think that's going to be inevitable. If you put Bill Hader in a horror movie, it's going to become funny.
Well, but Bill Hader's playing Richie, right? And Richie's character really is like that in the movies. Like
yes, but he wasn't funny in the first one.
But,
how dare you?
The kid was not funny.
I mean, maybe
as an adult,
maybe they should have. Yeah, maybe they should have played it up a little bit more or something like that. But I did kind of like get out of my seat a little bit when Bev is like beep Richie in part 2, and I was like, they did the thing, because it's almost annoying in the book, right? It's almost literally like every other sentence he'll start making a quip, and that's their way to interrupt him, is beep Richie. But yeah, I mean, I think almost all of the characters are pretty good in that one as well. They did a pretty good job capturing Mike, I thought, and Bill and everybody else. But yeah,
I really like them both. I think The Mist is one of my like high up there. Like, I wouldn't say it's an enjoyable movie, but I really like it. It's an engaging movie, and it really gets you. I've seen it like more than once. And it is good, but I haven't seen it that many times. I've seen the original It's more times, and I like them more. Probably nostalgia.
Right. I mean, who doesn't love Tim Curry? But, come on. The rest of the movie. So.
If I could have had these It's, but with Tim Curry instead, I think I would have that would have been the perfect It.
Right. Well, who's next?
Who is
Clearly
next?
Ben.
Yeah, no, I can totally. I know you're joking because I was off saying goodbye and stuff. My picks were a little bit more. I mean, one of them was a bit more artsy, and one of them was a bit more just plain gruesome. I think the one that
Pan's Labyrinth.
Which was your enjoyable?
So Pan's Labyrinth, I find enjoyable because it's got that kind of magical sense layered on top of the history of plausible kind of characters in this place. In revolutionary Spain,
sure.
Spanish Civil War kind of era. And then you have the magical story on top of that, running parallel to that, and a very sad ending. And the way these worlds interact back and forth, it's clearly got the kind of
ending. That's a good ending.
Well, she died.
But it's still sad. It's very good ending, but it's still sad.
Okay, so Andreas thinks that the fantasy bits were real. Got it. So
that's my conclusion is they're real because the Mandrake root affected reality.
I do think that like it and like movies like Nightmare on Elm Street, Pan's Labyrinth kind of plays with that dream logic of what it's like to be a kid and what the kind of associations your dreams make and the kind of things you think about when you're really scared and kind of get all wrapped up in your imagination. But then it's also that fun kind of adventure story. But it's also really, really phenomenal. It's the guy with the hands, right? Just like that guy just gets me every time. Right. As kind of fun horror, whereas Bone Tomahawk is a very grounded, very almost serious, but also kind of ridiculous movie about a guy with a broken leg crawling across the desert, about a guy being ripped in half, literally like a pig.
Bone Tomahawk reminded me of Berserk, which is a compliment I'll pay to it.
Oh, so I think it's a very well written movie. I think the guy who wrote Bone Tomahawk knows what he's doing. I think it's worth watching, but it is really brutal to the point that it's unsettling and ultimately unenjoyable. Though I feel like I love a lot of the movie. Most of the movie I really, really love. Once it gets to
like the 45 minutes walking across the desert,
it just kind of I know the ending, and even knowing the ending, it's not like a sit back and enjoy movie. It's a kind of edge of my seat, twisting in my seat, kind of not want to look at the screen kind of movie. I've seen it multiple times, but it's like so maybe I'm playing. It's right on the edge for me, so I think it's right there at the cusp of something that's almost too much for me to handle.
I mean, I still
say nothing more about I don't think anyone else I know could watch this movie. But
why have you seen it multiple times?
Well, it's on Prime, or it was on Prime for a while there. And
so
it's better than Pitch Perfect 3. I mean, what else?
I know. Of your own volition, you sat down and watched this movie.
Oh yeah, no, that's true. I mean, the assignment was the movie that's right there on the edge of what you can tolerate.
Fine, but I'm just saying, for me, because I'll go revisit a horror movie. It's almost not ever as scary the second time. Like the family's out this morning, so I started it this morning, and I'm like, man, I remember being so tense during the scene in the movie theater, but I know where all the jump scares are. I know what they're building to and all of this stuff. I wanted to get to some of the climax, but I just couldn't sit there through kids being dicks to each other for like 2 hours before we got to the meat of it, right? But so like Bone Tomahawk, like this, I might share this movie with somebody and then I would watch it a second time. That's why I'm asking, right? But I'm not going to just sit down on a Saturday and be like, well, I got nothing else to watch, so I'm going to put on some Bone Tomahawk. You know?
No, I think you kind of have to be interested in a setting like this, like a true like horror Western blend, which is what it's going for. It's like a slasher Western. Or like a monster movie Western, kind of the conjunction of monster movies.
Monster Western comedy.
I mean, Chief
that's got some weird comic elements.
Guys, like, there's no way that Chief wasn't a predator, like from Predator, right? I was just like,
I had a lot of questions that this movie didn't answer.
Yeah,
like how what? I just like all of like the weird body modifications that they had. Just like, are these people part alien? But they weren't answering the question because the point is like they're monsters regardless. They have to be put down. It's just like pulling the.
When you don't understand them, you don't understand what they're capable of, right?
Troglodytes.
Yeah. I gotta say, it had some of the best new jokes out of any of the movies. Like, I laughed at least twice, which is once more than Four Lions, which was supposed to be a comedy. But sorry, I had to dig that one in there. But I loved when I can't remember the characters' names right now, but the rich, proper guy, right? And he's like, are any of you guys somnambulatory? And the private.
That's private.
Yeah, that's private. Like he means sleepwalking. Oh, just like the total outrage and how ignorant this character is. Another fun aside, the deputy that is in the whole movie that looks ragged and all that shit, he's one of the two government operatives from Cabin in the Woods. And he is so beat down in this movie that I was like, I just did not even recognize him. And then the scene with them, like, looking through his telescope at a snake in a tree. What kind is it? Deceased. That for whatever reason just tickled me, because it's like they're watching this unfold. But
I thought there were so many funny moments. Like all the banter's really, really good. All the quipping back and forth. Like just this, I even like laugh out, like really like burst out laughing. But like even just like when he uses the binoculars and like, oh, can I use the German? And there's like, can the sheriff use the German? And the whole scene, it's just, I thought it really funny.
By then they had also gelled as a group, right? Like that, to me, that's what that scene kind of recognized, or like, was there for, is to show you like, we all just got in a gunfight together. We all know what's going on. We're starting to feel each other up instead of being four strangers that started up on this thing. Where it's like he's trusting them now.
If you liked this movie, the writer-director has another similarly brutal movie that's more of an action movie called Brawl on Cell Block 88 or something like that.
Okay.
I forget the exact title, but it's got Vince Vaughn as the protagonist, and it's just some real. It's this in his movies. There's almost like this indie flavor to it too. A low budget indie, not quite polished. Where something like the new It, very polished, very polished production. Even The Mist is pretty polished, but this is like a rough and ready. A guy came out with a camera, got a couple of friends together, and hired Kurt Russell for a day.
They straight up filmed it in like 12 days or something ridiculous like that, from what I saw in the trivia. So
was that okay? Yeah,
it was like a really quick,
that's a really good movie,
which is wild because they spent like 9 of those days walking across the desert. So that's just crazy to me. But
right, first take. You already read the script.
When you have all of those powerhouse actors, maybe you can. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Kurt Russell in a Western. Oh no, he's like, I don't even got to change, guys. Let's just turn on the camera, So,
well, yeah, I think it almost consciously did things like the racist guy and the damsel in distress, but also subverted them too, right? So it's like
the racist and distressed.
Well, I mean,
so it pulled from tropes that are controversial.
For him,
but then
he doesn't just hate the other; like he's got literally blood in the game, in his case. I love the fact that she's just she's just fucking yelling at them. They're literally 5 minutes away from being eaten. And she's like, you know why Pioneer life is so hard? Because you're fucking stupid. How could you be so stupid? And it's just like, and they're both like, sorry, ma'am. It's like, you just saw a man eaten and you're going to sit there and just like yell at each other. But I mean, she wasn't wrong. You know, it's one of my favorite John Wayne quotes, right? Life's hard, but it's harder if you're stupid. So
very relevant to that movie.
Right.
There's a few things I thought was like, I get why they kept them alive, right? It's, you know, you keep your livestock alive until you're gonna eat them. It keeps better that way. I didn't get why they just left, presumably what we saw on screen, the smartest one of the group. They left his corpse just, or their own for that matter. But you don't eat their own. But I don't know why they didn't eat him. They just killed like before they ate Nick.
Well. Yeah, and there's something to be said. Like, I mean, this is way too deep for I'm sure what the movie was going to, but like in hunting, in almost every other instance, you want a quick kill and you want to get the blood out of the body, and none of that was present when they killed that guy. You know, so like that was another thing where it's like these guys are not eating for like. That's not a hunt. They're not just like, this guy is some meat. Not to mention the fact that they probably could just go eat anything else. There's nothing to suggest the level of that usually drives cannibalism, right?
Their culture's pretty fucked up. See how they treat their women, right?
But
they got their
like there are also like health things that go along with it, which is another thing that kind of tips me over that these weren't just like different kinds of natives, like they're trying to tell you in the story that there's something else going on, because like you're certainly not getting 7 foot tall dudes out of cannibalism. That's not how biology works, right? So, you know, it's one of those, like, maybe there's some unanswered questions and whatever, but ultimately the movie is kind of thin for that, right? They had a premise, they went into it. They didn't spend a lot of time fact checking before they decided to include whatever scene. But that was one of the things that, like, even in the middle of the butchering scene, that I was just like, they're making this take a real long time. And you would not do that with, you know, you wouldn't do that with cows or deer or anything else that you would be actually eating. You know, so
that's one of the things that's a little unsettling about the movie, is that I have the kind of the feeling that he would have wanted to do a Cowboys and Indians movie, but and he's playing at those tropes, he's using those tropes, but then he kind of explicitly kind of papers it over at the very beginning. They're not Indians, which is right. And so I think he kind of wants to do the Cowboys versus Indians movie, and this is his way of doing that in a kind of officially acceptable way. And so that's one thing that makes me a little uneasy about the production of the movie, the concept of it.
Sure. I mean, and it's one of those movies almost where it's like, dude had a scene in his mind, like the butchering scene, and then he's like, well, how do we get to there? And it's like, well, I'm a little concerned about your mental health, my dude. Like, if that was the genesis of your story or whatever, because everything else, you can kind of tell everything else leads to that moment, right? Like everything is there. You've got to gloss over these certain things. Certain other things have got to happen. Let's not worry about the obvious, like, dozen other people worth of meat that are outside that are freshly butchered, you know, more or less, right? We got to get this one guy for this one scene, you know, and that's the thing where it's just like, you got to overlook enough. I kind of expected what I expected halfway through, you know, like Bone Tomahawk. I was like, okay, apparently we're just going to literally walk around the desert for 45 minutes. And then I got to imagine the climax is going to make it pay off. But like the first parts are great. The middle parts are and then the final parts are.
It depends how much you're invested in the characters, really.
Sure.
That's what I think that's what it's meant to do.
I really liked the actor that played the ex-soldier Indian killer. Like he played the role super well, and I didn't really recognize him. I was like, oh, I would like to see him in something else. He's really good.
Lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the doctor.
I'm not gonna watch Lost ever.
Season 1 and 2. Watch season 1 and 2.
I will never watch it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that I don't know what else he's been in, but that's the big one, though, like straight up. So, but
okay, who's next?
Yeah.
Okay, defend yourself.
No, that's a different movie. That's Secondhand Lions. So,
That's a better movie than Four Lions, Secondhand Lions.
Absolutely. Half as many lions, way better movie. At least.
And also, not the remake of The Lion King, but the original Lion King, better than Four Lions.
There's way more
movies,
than 4 lions in that movie.
The bottom 2 on the list for me.
Right.
Well, that's fine, because you also had a found footage one that was stupid. But
I mean, it's not high on the list for me either.
On your own list. That's why I was worried about you, Andre. So, yeah, how many new nightmares did you have anyway?
Halloween, like a lot of people, it's the kind of thing where now it's not going to, the remakes, I watch them. I've seen all the sequels apart from, I think, one. The thing that always got to me about Halloween was sort of the simplicity and the music. The music's the easy part. It's like it's 3 piano keys and 2 chords, and every time I hear it, even now as a 33-year-old person, it's like, oh, damn it. Now I got to look out the window.
Yeah.
It's
iconic.
Case.
It's just tubular bells and this stuff. It's just straight up iconic, man. So,
and a lot of other, I don't go in for slasher stuff. I'm not big on gore. Bone Tomahawk to me is not. It's too much. It's good in what it does good, but that kind of shit to me is just like, no, you're making me not want to have my lunch now. That's all you. That's all you're doing for me.
Yeah.
So things like that are just, And Jason Voorhees is a guy in a hockey mask, and he's also kind of cartoony. And Scream, as interesting as the first one was, is just like. But the simplicity of this slasher movie, where there's not a lot of blood, and it's just a guy in a mask that is a simple stilted mask, and you're not going to stop him no matter what you do. Well, I mean, even the new ones are kind of cartoony about that, but the initial one where it's just like, sorry, the dog is barking. I'll be right back. Talk about Halloween amongst yourselves for a minute.
Yeah. I mean, it does have some of the classic tropes, right? Like where it's just like, we shot the killer and then he survived. It's a very, like, you see stuff like that
those tropes, right? Didn't invent those tropes? Like this is.
It's very likely this was super early. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But like Alien, makes some use of some of the same types of things and others, right? Like it was kind of interesting in its simplicity, and then I kind of got in the rabbit hole about Shatner being mad that it was his face, even though it wasn't. Yeah, the mask.
It's a painted Shatner face mask.
Oh,
yeah. They like bleached it and stretched it out and shit.
But, I had thought I'd seen a factor that it was Nixon's face.
Yeah.
No, it was Kirk from.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what they were saying.
What?
Yeah. So, like I was saying, it's just it's a very simple premise. It's a very a guy who, as a kid, just kind of had something wrong with him, killed his sister, breaks out on Halloween night and goes after, at the time, it was his other sister that has since been changed. But, simple. And you're pretty much, unless you're a baby, you're not safe. So, it was always very unsettling to me. Now, the newer ones are, it's like every horror movie. It's kind of funny. In the most recent one, Halloween Kills, there's a woman who's like firing a handgun at him, misses every single shot, and then he kicks the car door and the gun spins around and shoots her. It's like,
oh jeez,
that kind of shit now is just hilarious.
Right.
But yeah, it is the simple stuff with Halloween. For me, it's the music, the simplicity of the premise, the fact that it's just a blank guy in a mask that pretty much is going to keep coming no matter what you do to him.
Right.
Was always off-putting. Well, not off-putting, unsettling to me.
Well, and it's funny too because it's like both the director in the trivia and like interviews and stuff like that, and then just kind of watching the movie, it's like he only gets away with as much as he does because they're idiots, right? Like either you take advantage of them of the time. Like some of my notes is like, let's just leave the back door open. Like even not knowing that there's a killer on the loose or whatever, like this is shit that's just incomprehensible to me. Like my brother and I are like kind of hardwired, especially after previous conversations about zombies and shit. You go through a door, you close it, period. Like, that's it. You at least close the door, if not fucking lock it. And so they just like full on like leave the door open and go see if my friend's been murdered across the street. Well, that's how the monsters get in, people. So it's like this movie must have been early enough that like nobody starts having
those 70s middle America, nobody cared.
Yeah. And then just straight up like, like in a way, I think a lot of the movies play into the fact that he's got to be some kind of supernatural, right? Because he just like picks up the kid with one hand and then stabs him and stuff. So he's almost like supernaturally strong, even though he's just supposed to be a dude. He gets plugged like 4 or 5 times, at least convincingly. We don't know if the doctor missed his shots, but I'm confident that the doctor,
even so, he fell out of a second-story window. You're not really
right. He didn't.
You wouldn't think you're just blinking after that, but and then he's gone.
Yeah. But yeah, no blood, no nothing. He's just gone. Which is it's such a great horror trope where it's like you thought you killed the monster and you took your eyes off of him for 1 second and he's gone. So
well, there's also the scene right before that main end where she like stabs him with the hanger and he's in the closet and he's kind of laying there. And
right.
If you didn't already know what to expect, you'd probably, for the first time watching that movie when it came out, would have maybe been lulled into. And then he just sits up in the closet.
Right. Yeah.
This, I think, is probably the best John Carpenter movie. Maybe The Thing. If you can handle that, is better. Right, it depends on what you like. If you really like Escape from New York, I guess that could be your bag. But I think Halloween is the quintessential super independent, low budget John Carpenter movie. He does everything. It works. It's great, and it is what it is. It's not. And he does a lot of. I think he does a lot of interesting things with framing and. Very lightly with characterization. I think it's one of a kind and it's unique. And I have the feeling that he's kind of like this workman, like everything I've heard about him, he's this workman like director who just does one thing and then moves on. He's a consummate professional. He does not get up into the mythos. He's just like, I did it for the money kind of director.
Right.
and he does it well. And so that's
that's the thing. It's like he does it well. Like I'm not sure I've seen like all of his stuff or anything like that, but he is definitely he was like one of the first directors that I could have told you who he was by name, where it's just like almost all of his stuff is good, right? At the very least. But this is good, even despite the fact that it is basically, one of those quick, college level, like just literally above college level types of things. It's all but found footage. They probably would have used it if it had been a concept at the time. It's that kind of thing.
I hate found footage as a concept. I'm just gonna say.
Oh sure, yeah, no.
A lot of them are. I mean, when we get to the next one, of them are. I've always found Blair Witch to be overrated. For instance, I mean, absolutely. It had its cultural moment. I could understand why people loved it, especially if you were on the internet in the early 2000s and visited those sites and had that kind of build up. So I get why it was what it was. It was just the movie itself, especially the way it ended, was always kind of like,
That movie scared the bejesus out of me when I was a kid.
We'll get to you. Hush.
Right. We're not taking any comments from the peanut gallery.
The last thing I'll say about Halloween before Paranormal Activities, I think, and granted, I can't remember a ton of other ones that actually use it, and I know it's in the name, but that uses the holiday to its full advantage, because any other time, especially if you're in the middle of a small town, if a guy in a jumpsuit and a mask is walking around in broad daylight, you're either getting your own gun or you're calling the cops. But it makes use of the holiday in a way that I don't really think any other slasher or horror movie in general ever does, because then they just lean too hard into the, it's Halloween, we have to do this ritual type thing.
Right.
Just as a setting, I think it uses the small town and the holiday very effectively. And then for Paranormal Activity, I think, again, especially considering it's found footage, I think it's probably the strongest of the main, there's Blair Witch, and there was another one I saw, some years ago that was kind of crap. No, and then yours, obviously, I guess, would be...
Yours is mega crap. This one was just regular crap.
Well, I mean, because as far as found footage goes, I guess the three big ones that left any kind of impression on me would have been Blair Witch, this, and the first Cloverfield.
Yep, I was thinking that because
there's a good movie.
That one's almost too much at times, but
Yeah.
you know, I liked the idea and the concept and everything like that.
Yeah, this one to me, I think was the strongest reason to have it the way it was. You know, the Blair Witch, fine, you're these documentarians, you're going out and about this, that, and the other thing, but it felt, you know, with the whole being outside, it's like it's just too much for me to accept that you're still keeping the camera on at all times. But this is, you know, it's a guy who is into cameras and some weird shit's going on in his house, and he's trying to assuage his wife's fears. Yeah. And it's like simple setting, you're not going anywhere.
The setup and justification for it being found footage I found was acceptable, but I hated the rest of the movie more or less. It was 45 minutes of these two people that I didn't exactly care about bickering. I would like them more if they weren't just arguing the whole time and characters being really stupid. And the creepy horror demonic thing wasn't enough. And then the ending was stupid. I just didn't really enjoy the movie.
That's a take. Yeah,
well,
I don't know. There's something about hearing a bunch of screaming off screen that you can't see anything about, and then having a dead body hurled at you that just kind of stuck with me for a couple of days. So
I read what the guy had wanted the original ending to be, and I think that would have been better.
You'll have to remind me. I'm sure I knew. But...
So it would have been that she had been possessed and killed him, but she didn't know enough of what's going on. And then like friends had come, cops were called, everyone's freaking out, and then she doesn't know what's going on, but she has a knife in her hand and the cops kill her. But it would have been, it made more sense to me instead of, no, we should stay here tonight after establishing for the rest of the movie, don't stay in the house.
Right.
And I don't know. Then she's never been found. She's just left. It's like, no, she should have died. It would have made a lot more sense in his ending instead of what he was apparently forced into.
Well, I mean, maybe forced into, but they take advantage of that in Paranormal Activity 2 as well, I think. So that's kind of interesting. Like, it's not like there isn't a payoff, and sure, that would have been dramatic, but they wound up making a chain of movies, which is hit or miss. I think certainly by 3, it's just completely irredeemable, I think, in my opinion. But it was one where it was like,
it was okay. I was never a huge fan of it. I don't like when these kind of things go on past. You had a good idea. You don't need to keep making more.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
right, and Blair Witch 2, another terrible movie.
Right.
I mean, Paranormal Activities was better than Blair Witch 2, but that's not saying much.
Yeah.
Right, and I mean, maybe you can make another movie along the same lines and whatever, but it's like, it's got to be different. Like, don't put a continuity on the story. We're not necessarily watching for the continuity, right? Part of the problem with the horror movies too is like when you're doing the sequel, like probably a lot of the things that made the first one great were the fact that it was new, or it was a new mix of things, right? You know, to me, that was Paranormal Activity. It was kind of found footage, but it was still mostly done through like security cameras and shit. So, you know, giving you nausea with the way they're handling the camera, which is a thing in Blair Witch and sometimes even in Cloverfield, you know, especially at the end. You know, so that's a big part. Like, found footage is great as a concept, but it has to be watchable. I can't have nausea watching your movie, or it's not going to work. You know.
Yeah, I do agree. So, this is probably the best found footage movie I've ever seen, of which I can only name 2.5. I've never enjoyed it as a concept, but it just onto that point. Andreas, defend yourself before I lampoon you.
What do you mean?
You know what you did.
Apparently, you're up next.
Yeah,
I don't understand. What's wrong?
Talk about Cabin in the Woods first to get off to a good start.
Please, yeah.
That wasn't
so it's only downhill.
Either.
Or should we save it to have a palate cleanser?
Yeah. I can't wait to hear all the ways that Joss Whedon made this movie terrible somehow, even though it was a fantastic movie.
Like, the concept of a horror parody.
Andreas has the floor.
Andreas has the floor.
Well, he decided to say, shut up and say nothing, so I will lampoon it.
He doesn't speak English. Give him a minute.
I don't know what's like. I mean, didn't rewatch Creep. I was like I had
You
two
motherfucker.
It was just amazing,
Right.
and I
don't really. I had two movies I could remember that I found vaguely disturbing, and I was not going to subject you guys to one of them because I would never watch that movie.
You should
again.
have.
I would no. I would not.
What is it? What is it?
It's a Serbian film.
Okay.
Oh, that would have been
no,
significant.
no,
I've heard of
that
it.
would have been miserable for everyone.
Right.
Yeah, I would not have. I mean, I'm not.
Isn't
I
that
don't.
one like?
Gore doesn't get me, but the stuff that goes on in that movie is
Yeah.
pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to like that was like I don't think Justin would have watched it. For example, I don't
well,
think ET
not
would
if he
have
knew
watched
anything about it. No.
Yeah, I've heard about
Uh,
it. It's been a while, but I mean that pushes like torture porn as a horror trope instead of like just.
Well, that's
horror,
I mean that's
right?
what the
You know,
premise
like-
is basically.
But it
that's
would've
what.
been-
It still would have been significant versus Creep, which was boring and bad and painful. Andres, you can continue
Creep
talking.
was the
before I-
only. Creep was the only other horror movie I remember watching in more recent times that I remember being like. I just remember like being unsettled by. Like I cannot think of a horror movie that's unsettled me. Not even Creep so much that it just sprung to mind, and it had to be one that was disturbing. And other than the Serbian film, I couldn't think of one, and I wasn't gonna submit a Serbian film.
I mean, I appreciate that, but still, Creep. Like,
Yeah.
there's a gulf between those movies, right? Like, there's an entire genre between those movies where you're just like,
yeah.
you know. Part of the problem I had with Creep was the fact that it was just like jump scares for like 80% of it. It was these
Right.
little
Yeah.
cute things like going to a fucking haunted house.
I think
And then
that
at the end,
ending stuck
Like,
with me.
yeah, I mean, kind of, but like the killer said, spoiler alert, the guy is an idiot, and that's why he's dead. So, like a lot of horror movies, somebody's got to be an idiot at some point, usually, which is why I tend to like the ones where that's not the case, right? I think that's where I like, Aliens, at least, especially. It's like there aren't a ton of people in the movie where I'm like, you're an idiot and deserve to die. That kind of takes it out of me. This guy had every single chance to not wind up dead, and he failed.
Got away and then went back.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like
There's also a second one, and I might even be mixing them. I watched both of them at the same night.
yeah.
Maybe, and I think the second one was actually better, but I can't submit a second movie over the first movie. So yeah, but Cabin in the Woods, though, that's a great movie.
It was
Right.
just disappointing.
Fantastic.
It's
You're
fantastic.
disappointing. So what do you like about it, Andreas, since this is your pick?
It takes all the tropes and like it kind of explores them, makes fun of them, and like gives this frame of world, like why, if all these horror movies really happened, why are they happening, like and like puts them into like a meta plot, and it's great. The acting's good. I love the stoner guy where he's like, why are you acting like this? Like you're a fucking whatever he's studying. Like what's going on here? Like it's so
Right.
it's great. It's a great movie.
Well, and what's funny too is like a lot of that is being driven by the government agency, and even to the point where like the stoner is actually supposed to have a little bit of extra something in his weed, and that's not working, and they have to give extra to the blonde cheerleader trope and whatever else, and there's
Or it's working
so
too well and he's just imagined the whole thing.
right. There's just so much to the movie, and then you get to the end, and it's Sigourney Weaver, and then they all die theoretically, and it's also one of those that it's like I'm left wanting more at the end, where it's just like, okay, well, so you got two things, right? So on the one hand, this organization is here to maintain the seals on the old gods that were hidden away and locked away, but if they get out, it's going to like destroy the world, right? But it's like, okay, but a bunch of primitives locked those assholes away a few thousand years ago, so it's probably not. But, it's just like, I kind of want to see, it's like, this couldn't have been their only option. They've got to have some kind of, fail-safe idea. But it touches on like every horror thing. And it's plenty gruesome, but that's not necessarily the point. Like I don't feel like they focus on it in a lot of scenes. It's not nearly as bad as Bone Tomahawk, in that particular scene and stuff like that. But
Well, I think
Right.
the reason there's no fail-safe or anything like that is because of the meta point they want to make is, the old ones are us, the consumers.
I've heard that.
And so it's like, you can't stop it once the movie's out. That's it. They're going to fucking
Sure.
tear it apart.
Right. Yeah, and I had heard that interpretation or whatever, or did he ever come out and say that specifically? Because
I don't remember
I
if he ever
thought that
did
was
specifically,
cute.
but that was pretty. That was it, because it's the tropes that we all know, and it's
Right.
this, and they're playing into, you got to keep the audience satisfied with these things, or turn them on their head because this is what they expect, and yada yada yada.
Right.
And what do we really want versus what we actually will like?
Right.
All that kind of stuff.
All right. So what was disappointing, director?
I like the concept of it, but somehow, and it's really hard for me to put into words why, neither the horror or the parody of horror worked for me. There was like, I even laughed at one of the jokes that he has a husband bulge, was like, I don't know, it took me by surprise. But
Yeah.
and I like the setup to all of the horror. I do enjoy the tropes, I guess, but somehow it just, towards the middle and end, it just kind of fell flat. Even seeing all of the monsters coming out of the elevators and all, like, that was kind of, but it wasn't enough. And I feel like if it had leaned harder into something, maybe with the ritual, I don't know. It just, like, I came away with it like meh.
I don't get it. It's
Joss Whedon is really hard for me to describe what I dislike, because he does the genre that I like, and yet I've not really enjoyed it.
I'm not even sure there were that many quips in this movie, Nan. So
There
it wasn't even
weren't.
just like
And,
his
like, it
his
was,
regular
like,
kind of humor.
That's why, like, the one that I laughed at, I was like, okay, that was fine. For some reason, that worked for me right then. And there weren't that many quips. It wasn't his normal sense of humor. And I did enjoy the first half of the movie, I'd say, but like the rest, it was just, it didn't take off as much as I thought it should have. And I was really trying to give the movie a fair shake when I saw his name on the front.
Yeah. I mean, so Cabin in the Woods is one of my favorites for sure. But I mean, I guess there is something to be said that as a result of like paying homage to all of the tropes and everything else that's going on, it just does kind of come through, slightly above middle, right? It doesn't lean into, it's not definitive in any way. It doesn't generate anything. I'm a longtime fan, at least in passing, of the SCP stories, right? So as much as anything, I'm just like, it's great that they've got a movie about a government organization that contains these monsters, and how did they go about it and what's going on and that sort of thing. So some of that stuff is neat, but it's certainly maybe in my top 10 as far as like enjoyable, but not necessarily going to keep me up at night and whatever. But, I mean, I can kind of see that where it just doesn't, like, the fact that it's a government agency running it, it would be the new, kind of thing that it brought to, that like all of the monsters are kind of just being held in containment here, like to the point where
there's more than one too, because Japan's got its own agency doing
right.
thing, because Japanese horror is this whole other brand of,
right.
You've got them sealing it in a fucking, what was it, a frog or something at the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was so great, and they're like yelling at the children, like,
fuck you,
how dare you, like, yeah, just it's hilarious. And then like you even see, like, for a lot of these guys, it's literally just a job for them, even though they're brutally, horrifically murdering these people, or at least causing them to be. And then you've got the guard, who it's clearly his first day on the job, totally uncomfortable with the whole thing, and somehow he's supposed to keep these two nerds safe when the shit hits the fan. There's just, I don't know, there's layers and layers and layers and layers to this. But I even love what's the guy, the gas station guy, Harbinger. Or whatever his name. Yeah, hilarious.
The Harbinger character
is he still going on? Like,
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because that whole thing is supposed to, I think, also foreshadow what happens, because they're not listening to what he's saying, and it goes back to what ends up happening essentially, because they're not taking it seriously either, because it's just part of this whole thing. But it connects to both the kids and to what ends up happening. If the whole speech plays out or whatever, I don't remember it word for word.
I thought it just sounded more like he was full of himself when he calls back, where he's just like, the babe is in the woods, and you'll listen to me, and just still being dramatic and in his character. And they're like, yeah, okay, Bob, whatever, man. So,
right, exactly.
yeah. But
I wish,
betting pool.
Right.
There's a difference between zombies and zombie redneck cannibal family incest.
I actually thought the director would like this one. I almost wish I'd used my other pick for just another good one because I didn't really have a disturbing one, and throw on Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Because I think she might have
I'm
liked
thinking
that
maybe
one.
I need to watch that because like a horror parody sounds really fun. Like actually, was it part 2 when they open the door and they see a Pomeranian? It's like no, that's a monster. I'm not touching that. Oh, make it sit. Oh, he's sad. He's so cute. And then it does them. I love that moment. So it's just like I need a horror parody apparently.
Right.
But this would just
Tucker
go
and Dale
flat.
versus Evil is really, really good.
Yeah.
You could just, watch that because it's a good movie. You don't have to be like doing a podcast.
No, she needs
and
to be
have some
given homework.
And
Yeah,
Okay.
if it's not on a schedule, it doesn't happen because I'm that lazy.
Andreas, you can pick it for your drama since apparently that broad ass topic is going to come up at some point.
Oh man, it would
I
almost
actually
work
watch-
with that one.
I actually watch a lot of dramas, and I got
Oh.
better picks.
I think, ironically, I think one of my, assuming we do 2 movies again, I think one of my movies will be technically a horror movie, but it'll be drama.
Hmm.
And
So-
drama horror.
So did we cover Creep enough? Like,
Oh
it's-
yeah, we're
it's
done. We're done
terrible.
with
The
it.
movie
Okay.
sucked.
Like,
I hated
Yeah.
you.
Oh,
Like I had to
Jesus.
keep pausing it
It
to
was-
go out to my husband to complain about the movie. I was folding laundry and I preferred the laundry more than the movie. I hate you.
I mean, I
watched-
And you didn't even
really
rewatch it, you
upset about it.
asshole.
I've watched
Well,
a
that wouldn't
lot
help
of
if
bad
you liked
horror, so I'm not even sure this is the worst one that I've seen. But that's where I think I finished it, and that's where I went to Andreas to be like, "Bro, I started with Hereditary. Are you gonna make it? Are you gonna be there on Saturday? Because Hereditary is a horror movie,
Mm.
and what the fuck did you just have us watch?
Hereditary
Like, it
was so
barely rates.
boring.
Oh, you're a fucking idiot, man. Like, I'm sorry to borrow something from Ben's parlance, but like, how could that be boring?
God,
Oh,
it
come
got
on!
better.
They spent 45 minutes in the goddamn desert, but Hereditary was boring?
I gave a shit about the Bone Tomahawk characters, and their quipping was fun, and they were interesting. I didn't give a shit about this stupid ass cult descendant family. I didn't care.
Don't lose your head, Andreas. It's fine.
Spoilers. Like, yeah, no kidding.
Well, only because you said that now they know.
I did feel like it was kind of an accomplishment when in the middle of watching the movie, Justin messaged me with all due respect, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I assume that was the
Well-
car scene.
Yes. Now, in fairness, like I was distracted at the time, and apparently the scene had more detail than I realized. I think it was the aftermath with the bugs in the highway that, was when I actually was like, what the fuck? And not to mention that, like as I read through the trivia and whatever, like they purposefully put the little girl up front in all of the stuff so that you would be blindsided by that. So apparently, like it was like actually a gruesome scene, and I thought about going back to rewatch it because what I remember watching was basically her hyperventilating, and then him very clearly she stopped breathing and died. I did not realize that she was decapitated until I saw the head a few minutes later, and then like I was like, shit. Do I go back and rewatch that scene?
You should
and
have.
I chose against it. I did not need that. Especially because there's a much worse scene later. It's horrible that this happened to a child. But the other scene is the one that's been with me for the last like 2 weeks.
And which one was that?
Really? You can't just guess?
There was multiple. Come on.
The piano wire, like it doesn't need to be said. Like, give me a break, man.
And they
Like,
pan away from most of it. Like,
no, they do not.
She saw her head off.
Just because you covered your eyes during that scene,
No,
they
no.
absolutely
She's
do
like-
not pan away from
she's
that.
like, and then like
then it goes
it pans
faster.
away, and you hear it for another 30 seconds, and you don't see anything, and you hear thump. That's what happened.
I think you looked away. So the piano
Yeah,
wire was
that's what happened.
definitely
We watched
weird
the
and
scene.
crazy. But when the kid was smashing his face into the desk and freaking out in school is what that was the other disturbing scene for me. But so
that one I did watch in full, and it was just like, yeah, that's I mean, horrifying is the only word that I can think of that comes to mind, but like horrific, right? Not necessarily like, like I could imagine being in that situation or whatever, but yeah, the catching on fire part was almost too cartoony. Like that one didn't necessarily get to me, but it was like in real life that would be awful, obviously, but also kind of based like similar to one of my favorite songs. But anyway, so anyway, Terry, it's your
battle scene from Pan's Labyrinth was like the desk scene, but worse.
Which one?
Gore-wise, like
beating the kid's face in with a bottle.
Oh yeah, sure. That was absolutely terrible too. So, but so like, and guys, just because like this also is kind of a vast genre and things like that, like just because there's violence and gore doesn't necessarily make it horror, right? So beating the kid's face in with the bottle does not make it horror any more than American History X is a horror movie, right? Just because you shrieked away from the violence doesn't make it a horror movie, right? There's more than that, and I just wanted to say that because Creep so barely qualifies, in my opinion. Even Bone Tomahawk, like if you strip away all the pretense and everything else, at the end of the day, if you take what they say in the movie as what it is, I mean, is it any different than half of the Westerns out there, right? Certainly they take it farther, but it's not necessarily a horror movie.
I didn't really feel like Bone Tomahawk was a horror movie, but we just went anything that had a horror tag was fair game, I guess, and that's fine.
Sure. And I'm just saying as a general thing, like it's not even you guys per se, but like, I'm just saying that scene in Pan's Labyrinth specifically, like that would not make it a horror movie any more than American History X, and y'all know what I'm talking about. So
no, I don't. I haven't seen that movie.
Okay, well,
I have seen that movie. I know what scene you're talking about. It's a really good movie, but I'm gonna talk to you about that after. By the way, Justin, I remember something I wanted to talk to you about.
Right. I'm just saying, if somebody tells you to bite the curb, you fucking make them shoot you because that's the American way. So, like, anyway, Hereditary. Is that what we're going to start with?
Sure. That one.
Did we not already? Does that not count?
I guess she didn't get her piece.
It was, I don't have any of, I'll say, risk factors as to why this one was personally disturbing. It was just affected me based on how well it was made. And I think like the kids, the beheading and all of that, that was so surprising. It kind of like put me like off kilter for the rest of the movie. And so everything else was even more on top of it. But like, not like the beheading and then the brother just driving home in shock and going to bed, and then the sounds of like her finding the body, like that whole thing.
What a mess!
Yeah, it was a lot. And then I mean, it did have that lull in the middle, but that lull was important because even rewatching it for this, I saw like in one of the first scenes, the kid had asked, "Who's going to take care of me after you're dead?" Mm-hmm. Like the grandma had told her everything that was going to happen. Probably had.
Right. Well, and from her own experience, as you find out in the movie. Yeah. So,
so I don't know. Like it was a very well made movie. I liked the way that Ari Aster had called it. It's a movie about ritual possession from the point of view of the sacrificial lamb. Like that's kind of what it is. And it just like after watching it, I was like, I need a palate cleanser. I need something else. I had like a hesitancy to watch it again for this. Like, there's no way it's not that movie as one, at least recently, the most disturbing.
Okay, yeah.
But you don't get to talk anymore.
Yeah, you had yours. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, like the multiple beheadings thing is almost over the top by the time you get to the end and realizing, oh right, it's the coven and stuff like that. I couldn't directly say where like a lot of the same kinds of tropes came from or like I was familiar with, but certainly like one of the Paranormal Activity movies goes into that, right? I think it's like 3 or maybe 4 where they start introducing the coven, and that's where I'm like, okay, this is kind of jumping the shark. You're getting way too deep into it, in my opinion. And so that was the nearest one that I could think of. But other than that, like it did feel fairly unique. And then, you know, it was kind of interesting that it's like all of the characters, they're just assholes. They're just like the family is just a bunch of assholes that live together being assholes. And then her grandmother was in this coven. So, you know, they're trying to resurrect this demon basically through this whole thing, you know. And
no, get the demons in the mother, right? And they have to move it to the son where it's supposed to be.
Is that what it was? Because I thought he just wasn't resurrected because there's this whole thing about the like the grandmother, or like, so mom's brother and the grandmother's son obviously was like, mom is trying to put people in my head or whatever, right?
Yeah,
and so it's like
he
she's
killed
tried
himself.
to do this before, you know.
And that was a whole thing. Like probably even that other cult people had tried to do it to their kids too. Like the Joan woman had lost her son and grandson. Maybe that was, I don't know. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, some of that though, like I was reading some of the trivia and stuff like that, and like in one of the scenes you can see the blackboard that she's got or whatever that she uses later. So it might have just been lies, right? She might have just been telling stories or whatever. But yeah, that would be an interesting dark twist as well. Like, oh yeah, I know what you're going through because my son tragically died too. What the hell is going on with our thing? Like,
I got the impression that the demon was in the mom and should be in the son, was because, as I get, it's like when in the end they talk like, we got you out of the wrong host and into the right host or something like that.
Yeah, it was supposed to go into the kid, the brother, whatever.
Yeah.
And apparently also a thing I noticed, because I rewinded to watch the beheading scene again.
Because you just want to have fun, right?
Like gore doesn't get me, so I just wanted like to see some detail, because there was like apparently, like I also had to go Google it. There is like the mark of the coven on that light pole.
Yeah,
I had actually caught that in a preceding scene, so I read that in the trivia, and I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense, and I was able to put shit together without needing that burned into my psyche. So by watching it,
so it was all, it was all planned.
Well, ish. Yeah. I kind of get the feeling. So like one of the scenes they talk about how like when they're doing research about him, that he goes after the weakest or whatever, and so honestly I think they don't know how it's going to shake out necessarily. They just know that everybody except for one needs to die, type of thing. And the kid just happened to be the survivor. The fact that the coven had like their symbol on the pole, they probably expected him to like go drinking and wrap his car around that said pole, not the other way around.
I don't know. I got the impression that it specifically had to be him.
I was gonna say I was pretty sure there was a line that said it had to be a dude, but
okay.
Yeah, it had to be a male because Paimon is male. It prefers a male body. There does seem to be a sense of like not just the ritual that the coven is trying to do, but like they had explicitly set up somehow, magic wise, probably it was going to happen in that way, because they seem to want the girl's head because they put it up on the
they all had
statue
to be
at the end,
right?
Yeah.
Fashion.
It's all weird, but yeah, that movie was
yeah, that's the weird part.
It
right.
It had a lasting impression on me.
Yeah, can't imagine.
I felt kind of bad asking parents to watch it.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, it's a general thing. Like, don't enjoy violence against women and children, right? Leon the Professional is a great movie. Don't like watching it over and over again. Like stuff like that. Hereditary's probably not going to be on. Yeah, Hereditary's not going to be on my rewatch list. Have a huge amount of problems with it and that sort of thing, but it makes sense in context to that movie and whatever. It kind of makes sense in context to this movie, but yeah, I definitely just don't go out of my way to watch it and whatever. But it's like, even though this kid is like a teenager, the son and whatever, like some of the shit that happened to him was plenty horrific as well. That mom was clearly under control a few times in his past, and he almost didn't make it.
Yeah,
and she was able to like break out of it and stuff. So it's just
the fact that she had been suffering under this for a long time and maybe was trying to break out of it in some way. I don't know. I found that a very interesting question. Like, how many times was when she was trying to kill herself and the children, was it just to get away from the cult, just like her brother and maybe father had done?
Maybe, or just that the cult had grabbed her by then. Through their rituals and whatever else. Yeah. But it was kind of wild too, because like in the climax where he's just like running through the house and everything, and you start to see them popping out of the literal shadows and stuff, and I'm like, who the fuck are all these people? And so like I had to dissect that a little bit, because it's just like, okay, I mean, I get like we've got the whole like naked sex party thing going on because witches and whatever else, but yeah, but like the trivia helped fill in the gaps that it's like really you do see these people through the movie, right? Like some of them are teachers at his school or whatever like that, and some of them are people that you see with with the mom's group and all of this.
The biggest
other
thing
stuff,
is you probably see them all at the funeral in the beginning.
Right, that too. Yeah. So yeah. But.
And then my other choice, my favorite out of the horror genre is Alien because of it's my childhood. I mean, it's like of all of the if I think of all of the horror movies that I really love, which there are plenty, this one is just kind of like, yeah, but it was that one. It was the best one, just a little bit. Or it's just kind of too nostalgic or whatnot. Like I do like Aliens a little bit more, but with that one, because it shifts towards action, like I feel like it would be a caveat to say that one instead of Alien, which is firmly horror, and it's a great movie.
Well, and I mean, kind of one of my vices that we've talked about too, like Aliens has a bunch more one-liners that you can remember and quote the shit out of that movie. Alien is iconic, and it's certainly necessary to be able to get to Aliens because it sets up, a lot with the monster and that sort of thing. But, like the first, decent chunk of Alien is like a bunch of crew that you don't really care about just getting eaten until there's only one left, for the most part. And
I actually found them really endearing really quickly. Maybe it's because I've watched it I don't know how many times, but like I liked their blue collar-ness of like, we need to talk about the shares. We need to talk about our pay money and all that. Like we're not the office people. We're the rough and like engineers and everything. Like I appreciated them.
Yeah.
Am I the only one who thought think that Aliens is better than Alien?
No, you're not. I think I just said that a minute ago.
We were just talking about that. Yeah.
No, I mean, there's a lot of sequels. I mean, well, I shouldn't say a lot of sequels. A lot of sequels do suck, but I mean, T2, Empire Strikes Back, I like those more than the original. Same with Aliens.
Well, and think about the time frame too, though. Like in the 80s, it was Aliens and Terminator 2, and like you could just about count them on one hand. Like what good sequels look like. A lot of other stuff back in the 80s and 90s was direct to video. If you got a sequel, and so you knew what to expect. If you've watched VHS tapes, if you're that old, then you know what direct to video means.
Or was Temple of Doom and annoyed me.
Right.
Temple of Doom was fun.
Yeah, well, another exception, right? Like Indiana Jones having multiple good movies and Star Wars having multiple good movies, like those were exceptional for a real long time.
The second Mortal Kombat movie, way better than the first one.
Yeah, no way, man. First Mortal Kombat owned the cheese. You just got to go all the way in. Like this is the part where you fall down. Like all of it.
Yeah.
Man. So
you don't think the second one owned the cheese?
No, I think the second one embraced the cheese and was.
Just I think the second one suffers from not having Christopher Lambert again.
God.
That was because they replaced him with what's his face. Who's he's one of those. I've seen him in everything, but I never know his name type people.
Right.
Because he never gets a real role.
Yeah. Did we do it?
I think we did it.
Yeah. Were there any movies other than Creep that you just like hated and didn't understand why they were on the list? Like just in general?
Honestly, no. That was the only. I mean, I didn't like Paranormal Activity. I guess Halloween was probably the next middle ground. It was acceptable.
I mean, I've never found Pan's Labyrinth to be a horror movie. I enjoy it.
No, yeah,
I enjoy it. I mean, sure, it counts as horror,
but I don't. I get it.
I included as it was the most horror-like thing I legitimately really enjoy from start to finish. And,
fair enough.
It's so that I can say that's just the way demonstrated. I don't really have taste
Creep.
for it.
Yeah, right.
Well,
you are not the big loser.
You know what?
Ben.
I didn't choose the oldest movie on this list by a long shot.
Congratulations.
Right. Yeah,
there you go.
Once,
you're welcome.
Everybody gets one. Yeah. Did anybody else pick a new favorite or like see a movie that you wouldn't have watched, maybe that you did enjoy?
Well, I was forced to watch Bone Tomahawk. I know what happens in Bone Tomahawk. I was not looking forward to watching it.
I loved Bone Tomahawk. It was a great movie. And I don't think I would have found it.
Check out Brawl on Cell Block, whatever it is. Brawl on Cell Block 88.
I mean, a big deal is also that it's a Western,
just
and
watch the Raid or
I like Westerns.
Yeah. What about you, director? You were trying to say something, and
I probably wouldn't have watched it unless for this,
Okay.
or Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah, you got to
Well,
watch
between
Cabin in the
it and
Woods.
Hereditary, we're gonna have a bunch of body parts. We're gonna be able to summon Kid Exodia at some point. I'm glad.
What are you going to do with 5 heads? Like,
no, it was Georgie's arm. It was the girl's
Oh.
head. You know, we just need 3 other movies: 2 legs
Bruder's-
and 1 arm.
What are we
Bruder
gonna do
had
with
the other
spare
arm
heads?
in Bone Tomahawk.
The spare
you
heads you
almost-
throw at your opponent while you're trying to draw the cards.
Okay, fair enough.
You almost had a leg in Bone Tomahawk. Let's see what there wasn't there in all of these movies.
There's like a hand in Bone Tomahawk that gets cut off.
Yeah.
Use that.
Yeah, that was Bruder was the character I couldn't remember. He was the proper rich guy with the tons of experience and whatever. So but,
That scene with the music, with the piano, one drink to get started.
right.
That movie was so good.
All right. Well, 2 weeks, no, a month we're doing dramas.
Yeah.
So in
So-
2 weeks we're
So
doing
2 weeks is nothing.
who knows. Yeah.
2 weeks is
2
not-
weeks.
It's not
2 weeks.
nothing.
You're skipping. We're skipping 2 weeks, or is it just no topic?
Wait.
That was no topic.
No
No set
topic right
topic
now.
yet.
Oh.
Unless, would you like to suggest something? We can argue about it right now.
Yeah, but we're supposed to do that while we're off, not in front of the
Favorite
fans. They
black
can't
and
know
white
we have
movies.
such strife between us.
Favorite black and white movies.
Oh
shut up.
no.
I mean, I would have to put on Sin City as the only one,
Metropolis
and then
And
uh,
that's a good one. Is
Schindler's
Dark
List.
City black and white enough, or is there too much color?
High.
Dark
These are-
City,
you guys are all
it's got a
choose.
bit too much color, I'd say.
Dark City.
Yeah,
Now,
it's not.
there's a
It's not
weird
actually
movie.
grayscale. It's just dark and mostly black and whites. So, what about Pleasantville? It starts out black and white.
I hate
I
that.
would say that
sure.
counts.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where these topics are just getting to be like, okay, how can we push so and so's buttons? You know, and just be like, yeah.
Well, let's just do Marvel.
well,
No, that's gonna
since
piss me
drama
off.
is since drama is so broad, we could like straight up just pick. you
Non.
know.
Oh, here. How about the non-MCU Marvel movies?
Oh no,
So, like, Blade.
no.
No, I get Blade. Screw
No,
you.
no, no, no,
Fantastic
no. Yeah,
Four:
I mean,
Rise of the
you're
Silver
thinking,
Surfer.
You're thinking Blade, but you know, there's terrible Hulk. There's
Captain
old
America,
Captain America,
1991.
right?
Right.
Yeah, you don't know what you're saying. And I've
so many
seen all
bad
those
movies.
movies, and I'm telling you, you don't want to do this. Like,
All right, I'm picking Blade and
Possibly
Blade 2. That's it. That's me.
Yeah.
Easy. Blade and Blade,
Blade
2.
3? Come on, Blade 3 is
No,
I
Blade
think
3 is
3
terrible. Blade and Blade
but I
2
think
are
Blade 3 was more
magnificent.
enjoyable than Blade 2, in my opinion.
You're wrong.
Okay.
It's absolutely complete. This is your creep take. This is bad.
this
bad.
isn't going to
Blade
work
3
for
was
2 weeks anyway
ridiculous.
because we won't have enough time for you guys to watch all these movies you haven't seen. But you know, Daredevil needs to go on the list if we're going to be serious.
Ben
about
Affleck's
this.
Daredevil. Woo!
Yes,
Elektra.
dude. Ben
Oh, the
Affleck's
first-
Daredevil is the reason why superhero movies exist. In my,
I was going to say
opinion.
the first
say
Ghost
whatever you
Rider.
want,
The
but-
first Ghost Rider. I'm going to sneak in a Nicolas Cage movie.
God.
There you go. Nice.
Well, I mean, you also get your X-Men, your Sam Raimi Spider-Mans.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But no,
Spider-Man 3, specifically Spider-Man 3.
that. So
You-
are we just
you
picking
did.
bad movies
Yeah.
at the end of a trilogy? Spider-Man 3, Blade
Here's-
3.
Here's the
Oh,
problem with your
second
question,
sequels.
EG. He thinks they're all bad. He thinks that all Marvel movies are bad.
No.
How could he tell the
Yeah,
difference?
you could do bad second sequels. You could do was it
Oh no.
Batman and Robin? You do
Batman
Superman
and Robin is
3.
a treasure. How dare you?
what's a second sequel? Isn't that just a sequel?
The number 3 in a series.
Yeah, the third.
No.
Why not
Fast
just
and
call it
Furious,
third
Tokyo
then?
Drift.
Although I was going to say, I don't think Batman and Robin counts because it would be Batman Forever. That was the third movie.
Was
Batman
it?
and
Oh,
Robin's
that's right.
the
That's
fourth
right.
one.
I'm sorry. It's the one that introduced Robin. I get those mixed up. Batman Forever, right?
Yeah.
Which is the better one.
Which it is the better one, but unfortunately got a sequel.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Sequels that were better.
Can
than
we
the
make an
original.
entire movie based around ice puns? The answer is yes. Can we set it in Gotham
Not an
City? The
entire
answer is yes.
He was
If
the
we're
best
gonna
part of that
watch a
movie.
lot of dramas for a month from now, we're probably not gonna do a big movies episode 2 weeks from now.
Oh no, I
Right.
know. I know.
You think?
But whatever it is
Yeah,
that
I
we're going
gotta-
to talk about, we're going to make fun of Ben doing it.
I gotta go find a copy of the Crucible somewhere. Can you imagine? Like
Oh, please. No.
nobody likes that movie.
The Crucible
I didn't like the
3.
book, let alone the movie.
I had to read it
No,
in school.
it's-
Watching the movie
It's
was
all
actually more fun
terrible.
than that.
I had to put it on the list though because it's got like one of my favorite characters of all time in it, so it's going on the list.
More weight?
Yes. Giles Corey makes that entire movie.
You mean Ebenezer without the magic?
Yes. How about a guy who's so fucking stubborn, he's stubborn to death? That's my hero.
He is a pretty badass character.
He's like the only guy in the entire story that has his head on his shoulders, and he dies for it. Like, it's just, yeah.
That's religion for you.
Yep.
Nothing more to yell about for today?
No,
We'll save it for
cancel.
two weeks?
Turn us off. We're done.
Okay.
We're done.
Okay.
I'm done